Another thing from their story that we have to understand and prepare for today is Surah Al-Hijr. Allah Azza wa Jalla said, and our brothers and sisters, go back to the story of Lut, read it, take lessons from it. When the angels came to visit Lut alayhi salatu wasalam, and he took them as guests, and he thought that they were humans, they're guests, and he let them in, and they came running. The homosexuals came running to the house of Lut when they saw these men entering his home. And can you imagine that? They see men entering his home. They run to his house. Right? Look at the level of their desires. They have one another. That's not enough. We want those guys going there. So they go to Lut, alayhi salatu wasalam. They knock on his door. Lut said, they're my guests. If you guys want decency, they are women. I have my daughters, this, that. What did they say? أَوَلَمْ نَنْهَكَ عَنِ الْعَالَمِينَ. What did they say to Lut? Have we not forbidden you from having guests? It got to that point. Yani Lut alayhi salatu wasalam is calling them to Tawheed. Lut alayhi salatu wasalam is telling them to leave alone, to abandon in this undecent action. No. They said to Lut previously in Surah Araf, we want you out of our city. You and us can no longer remain in the same land. And now Lut alayhi salatu wasalam has guests. Knock on his door. Did not we prevent you from having guests? Yani they wanted Lut to be cut off from the rest of the city. He cannot speak to people. He cannot have people in his home. So my dear brothers and sisters, it's very important we understand that this doesn't stop with us, them having their beliefs and their actions. Anyone who doesn't agree with them, they do not want those individuals to be in their company. They do not want to share the same job with them, the same neighborhood with them. Look at what they reached. Have we not informed you can't have guests? What's wrong with Lut having guests? And those individuals did not realize those were the same angels that would destroy them. The same angels that would destroy them. Lut alayhi salatu wasalam closed the door and said to them, I wish I could defend you. I wish I could protect you. And they said, Lut, don't worry. They will not reach us. We've come to inform you about the punishment. But the point of the story, my dear brothers and sisters, and you can read it in its totality, look at the level. Look at the level that they have reached. Did we not prevent you from having company? No one is to talk to you. No one is to talk to you. So those are some of the benefits that we derive from the story of Lut, and you can refer back to it in the Quran. Very important for us to understand, but not just to read those stories, as Allah Azza wa Jalla mentioned. Those stories are a reminder. Those stories are a lesson. Those stories are guidance for the believers. Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions those stories for a reason. As for their movement, for us to understand the danger of their movement, one of the things, or from that which we will mention, is that the number of foundations, organizations, committees, government leadership is unprecedented. This organization in their movement, the amount of organizations, the amount of committees, the amount of foundations, right? The amount of leaders, politicians, unprecedented. Never witnessed before that a movement would have so much support. And it's very alarming. Not only that, but these individuals, their organizations and their committees, they actually come together and create strategic plans. And anyone that has any knowledge of business, strategic plans, 3-year plans, 5-year plans, and what you have, Fortune 5, for us to understand, Fortune 500 companies, they make strategic plans. Why do you make strategic plans? Because you're looking for growth, because you're looking for expansion, because you're looking for mass production, because you're trying to avoid failure, because you're looking for a sustainability, and many others. When those companies make strategic plans, they're trying to spread, they're trying to grow, they're trying to expand, they're trying to make sure that they're sustainable, that no matter what happens, this company will last and survive. The LGBT movement have strategic plans for growth, for lack of failure, to avoid failure, right? They mention in one of their articles, our 5-year strategic plan builds on our existing strengths while addressing the changing needs of the LGBTQ plus communities. So they're sitting down in England, in America, in Canada. They're looking at their strengths and the challenges. So when they plan, they look at the current affairs. What are we doing right? How many gays and lesbians do we currently have? What do we do to increase this number? So the reason why we mention this is because we want our brothers and sisters to understand it's not that they're just comfortable with their present numbers and they're comfortable with their present followers. No. They're trying to see how can we grow? How can we increase our numbers? Just like a company like Amazon and others, how can we make sure that we make, if this year we made $1 billion, next year we want to make 5 billion. So they're doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing. They're sitting and planning, right? And monitoring. We don't have enough new followers. We need more. Which platform haven't we entered yet? Where can we go next to make sure we're sustainable? To make sure nothing harms this movement. It's for us as Muslims to realize it's a battle. Another thing to show you, and these are articles online, according to the 2021, and this is 2 years ago, the US government census, the data which is collected, the LGBTQ plus community is the fastest growing minority segment in the US, with close to 1.4 trillion spending power. 1.4 trillion. You know how much money that is? That goes into spreading, promoting this movement. There's no minority that has this amount of spending power. Right? That's a factor. That's another addition. Another aspect. Because they realize something, entering into schools. Entering into the school curricula. That's a part of their strategic plan. To enter into the school curriculums. To the point where, and we'll go back to a fada mentioned by the scholars, out of the 50-something states, now you have 7 or 8 that have made it mandatory for it to be included in the school curriculum. Mandatory, right? And then you have 32 of those states, they don't have specific laws. They haven't made it mandatory. It's there, but it's not mandatory. Then you have 5 that disagree and they prohibit it. And alhamdulillah, Florida is one of them. And then you have others that parents can opt out. What's meant by that? What's meant by that is, if you live in those states that have made it mandatory, as a parent, you do not have a right to prevent your child from studying it. As a parent, your children can be taken away from you if you prevent your children from studying it. Your children can be taken away from you. You no longer have the right as a parent to protect your children from this indecency. No longer have the right. That's one of the things that they have done. But we wanted to mention a fa'ida, of why they have mentioned schools or why they have focused on schools. That goes back to their strategic planning. They realized with trial and error that schools are one of the places, once they began to introduce their filth in schools, they saw a rapid increase in their number of followers. They saw a rapid increase in their number of followers, right? Islamically, this is a fact which is mentioned amongst the scholars of Islam. The youth, and aiming at the youth. An example of that is mentioned in the hadith in Sahih Muslim. And it's mentioned, this story, this hadith is mentioned in the Salihin in the chapter of patience. The long hadith, and many of us know it, where the Prophet ﷺ said that there used to be a king. And that king had a magician. And the magician became old. So he said to the king, I've become old. Send me a young boy so I can teach him my magic. Send me a young boy so I can teach him my magic. And remember, the king brought a boy, and the boy, every time he would go to the king, and he found a monk, and the monk began to teach him. Remember, at the end of the story, the king couldn't kill the monk. The king couldn't kill the boy until he did what the boy told him to do. He dug trenches and he lit fires, and the people jumped into the. We know the story. The point of that is that the scholars mentioned that the reason why the magician said to send me a young boy is because children are more receptive of knowledge than older people. And this is mentioned by Shaykh Uthaymeen. Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, in his explanation of Riyadh al-Salihin, he gives paragraphs to this. He said, وَاخْتَارَ الْغُلَامِ لِأَنَّ الْغُلَامِ أَقْبَلَ لِلتَّعْلِيمِ. The magician requested for a young boy because the younger the child is, the more receptive and open-minded they are to learning. The more receptive and open-minded they are to learning. Right? He said, وَلِأَنَّ التَّعْلِيمِ لِلْغُلَامِ الشَّابِ هُوَ الَّذِي يَبْقَى وَلَا يُنْسَى. He said, and because when you teach a child, the knowledge will remain and will not be forgotten. This is Shaykh Uthaymeen saying this. This is a scholar of Islam saying this. Right? وَلِهَذَا كَانَ التَّعْلِيمُ فِي الصُّغَرِ خَيْرًا بِكَثِيرٍ مِنَ التَّعَلُّمِ فِي الْكُبَرِ. He said, and because of that, teaching the youth is stronger and more effective and has a greater impact than teaching the adults. Right? Then he said, therefore, he said, لكن التعلم في الصغر فيه فائدتان عظيمتان. He said there's two tremendous benefits of teaching them when they're young. Right? The first فائدة أن الشاب في الغالب أسرع حفظا من الكبير. He said the first benefit, a child can remember and memorize quicker than an adult. Right? Because the children, they're not busy, they don't have responsibilities, they don't have obligations, so they're open-minded. So they can memorize, they can remember, right? And then Shaykh Uthaymeen goes on to explain that. He said, he even brings the statement, إِنَّ الْعِلْمِ فِي الصُّغَرِ كَالنَّقْشِ فِي الْحَجَرِ. He said, like it is a famous, wise statement, and that is, teaching the youth is like engraving in a rock. It's like engraving in a rock. It remains with them. They won't forget it. The point of that which, and then the last one he mentioned, وَهِيَ أَنَّ الشَّابِ إِذَا ثَقَفَ الْعِلْمِ مِنْ أَوَّلِ الْأَمْرِ صَارَ الْعِلْمِ كَالسَّجِيَّةِ لَهُ وَالطَّبِيعَةِ. He said, the younger they are, when they learn something and they become acquainted with it, it becomes their nature. It becomes their nature. So that benefit, or those benefits that Shaykh Uthaymeen mentioned, is the same reason why they have begun to focus on the schools. on the curriculum. Not just the schools, the curriculum, the books. And you may think, but what's the difference? Because if they only focus on the school, right, spreading it in the school, but that doesn't necessarily affect what's going on at home. We understand that? But if you focus on the curriculum, you got them in school and you also got them where? At home. You got them in school and you got them at home. And there was another article by one of the foundations which is in opposition. One of the foundations which is in opposition to the LGBT movement. They mentioned the dangers of this in school. And they're giving awareness to the parents. They said, as a parent, you should understand. And I'm paraphrasing it. They said it's not just in the classroom. They said it's not just in the classroom. This movement is a school-wide movement. It's a school-wide movement. So it's in the corridors. It's in the lunchroom. It's in the entrance to the school. Right? It's everywhere in the school. So they made the school an environment that promotes homosexuality, not just it being taught in the classroom. So when your child is playing in the gymnasium, flags everywhere. When the child enters into the school, flags. When the child is just walking through the corridors, it's being promoted, pride. Right? So they tried to say, you should understand the dangers for your children just entering into the school. Just by entering into the school. Additionally, how have they introduced this into the school? Not only the textbooks and the likes, the school library. The school library. So the books inside of the library. And children in general, they like to go to the library to read, to enjoy. They do group reading and the likes. So they put it inside of the library. Not only the school library, the neighborhood libraries. Right? So they supported the authors to write books, the suggested reading lists in the school library and in the neighborhood library. And subhanAllah, they have a suggested reading list for all age groups, 0 to 5. And subhanAllah, what do you mean 0? And this is actually in the public school and the neighborhood suggested summer reading list. It says 0 to 5. And then it says 5 to 10. And then it says 10 to 15 and the likes. Suggested reading list. So they have bedtime stories for that spread and promote homosexuality. Bedtime stories. Right? Some of those books. An example, and these titles that we're going to mention are actually taken from the suggested reading list for children. Boys Meet Boys. That's one of the books talking about, and is no longer, because previously children were interested in books that talk about camping, fishing, right? Hiking, motorcycles. No. Their books, they make sure strategically to mention the boy kissing another boy. So what happened to the hiking, the camping, the fishing? No, it's strategic. So that one, and you can look for these books. Boy meets boy. Another book, Queer Heroes. So now Superman, Batman is gay. Right? So notice, our children love cartoons. Right? Children love cartoons. Queer heroes. So now Superman and Batman are gay. Captain Underpants. Captain Underpants. And by the way, my brothers and sisters, it's not just that the superhero is gay. No. In these books, they mention about him looking at the privates of another superhero. Or a boy looking at the privates of another boy. When was that in children's books? That was never in children's books. Pride of the Lion. So now Lion King is gay. Freak Boy. Two boys kissing. These are titles of books. She drives me crazy. A girl in love with another girl. She drives me crazy. Listening to my body. So a child exploring his body and another child's body. My dear brothers and sisters, these are all taken from suggested reading lists in school libraries and in your local libraries. I took this from a list suggested. We had 4 pages in the Newark Public Library. And it's printed online for your children to read. Another thing, we mentioned about the issue of informing parents or not informing parents. With these different laws and in the different states, it is no longer mandatory for schools to inform parents of the content in books. In fact, pay attention, and this taken from their websites. If a child expresses that he or she is confused about his or her gender, the school is advised not to inform the parents. Now you have Supreme Court cases. You have Supreme Court cases that parents are now suing the Board of Education because the Board of Education kept it from the parent. Kept it from the parent. Another article, and these are all on their websites. As an increasing number of elementary, middle, and high school students in the US have begun to identify as transgender, school leaders have struggled to figure out how to respond, right? And whether to communicate about their actions to parents. I'm a parent, this is my child. I'm a parent, this is my child. No. In Maryland, for instance, 3 sets of parents filed federal lawsuits in 2020 that challenged school guidelines allowing students to express their gender identities at school. In some situations, teachers and other school staff are asked not to notify parents that they are doing so. So parents are not notified. In fact, you have teachers that have been terminated who tried to secretly inform the parents. So you had some teachers that worked in schools that felt it is the moral obligation upon them to inform the parent. So they contacted the parent. The parent contacted the school. They investigated. They found out which teacher it was. They terminated the teacher. They terminated the teacher. Likewise, another example of this is the fact that they strategically try their best to put leaders or political leaders in certain positions. And that's why, my dear brothers and sisters, when we deviate from the book of Allah and the sunnah of our Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we fall into these types of problems. Imam Hassan al-Basri rahmatullahi alayhi said an important statement. He said, "Al-fitna إذا أقبلت يعرفها العلماء وإذا أدبرت يعرفها كل جاهل." Imam Hassan al-Basri said a very wise statement. Imam Hassan al-Basri from the Tabi'een. He said, when the fitna is approaching, the scholars know about it. When the fitna is approaching, the scholars know about it. They're aware of it. They warn of it. And when it's done its damage, everyone knows about it. Once it's done its damage, everyone knows about it. The reason why we say that is because have not our scholars informed us about voting and taking part in politics and the likes? So all of those Muslims who, for example, voted for Barack Obama, the politician that had the most support for the gays and lesbians and LGBT was Barack Obama. They were able to accomplish things they've never in the history of their movement, they were never able to accomplish until he came into office. So now we understand the warning of our scholars.